Compañeros! Welcome to another edition of... Oh, you know what? Hold on. Hey, wait.
Fine. You want to give me a heads up what the topic is for today?
Oh, well, you're going to find out like everybody else, so we're just going to find out.
Right. You're announcing that you've gone back to the land, you're going to be a farmer. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Man, this is getting deep all of a sudden. Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. I am Carlos El Chacon, and I have hit the record button on my Zoom meeting. So just in case we get disconnected from the live stream, we can still have a podcast. So, Udalali. And we are keeping up. This is episode 218, and we are keeping up our little, I don't know, the games are afoot. And I have one of my two accomplices here, Eugene Meininger.
Yep.
Looking well rested. The beard has come in nicely.
I got some like 50-degree weather down in North Carolina while it lasted, so it was good.
Yes, it is cold here in the eastern United States these days. Now Dan is listening. He's here and he's like, "Oh man, you guys don't even know." Now he's a little further south, but he's
my heart's breaking for people in Texas right now. It's a real tragedy what's going on there. So I'm grateful to have heat.
Yes, that's right. So Houston. So shout out to Brianne, who is one of our new associates in, it's here at SQL Data Partners. So she's down in Houston and just pinged me on Teams maybe 20 minutes ago they had lost power.
Cool.
So luckily she has some good neighbors, right? So they're taking turns. So the neighbors didn't have power, so they came over to her house. Now she doesn't have power, so they're going back over to the neighbors. So they're ping-ponging a little bit there.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that you got some rest last week, and you feel refreshed, and so it's good to have you back.
Yep.
So our episode, our show notes for today's episode, compañeros, is going to be SQLDataPartners.com/218. And you're saying, wait, and I do not have a background. Look at that. But you're saying, wait, no, normally, Carlos, we have a some other notice. I'm like, yeah, normally we do, but today we're not going to, and hopefully that's okay. Because today we'll see where we go with this. But I have a couple of I have something that we might want to talk about, or something that I have been thinking about lately, and that is file growths. So we're going back to I don't know if it's DBA 101 necessarily, but back to some of our DBA roots. I wanted to talk a little bit about file growths and how they play into performance, why they're important. So we all know that data, as data grows, right, as we get more data, right, our files need more space, and we've all run into that. And hopefully, not too many of us have run into situations where it's like, oh, we've run out of space, right? Now we need more. So we want to talk a little bit about that today, among anything else that might be coming our way. Okay, so before we do that, we do have a couple of shout outs. So I want to give a shout out to Zeze, Andir, Lucas Root, Ilium Vale, and you'll forgive me, compañeros, as always, Hilda Alvarez, down in sunny Florida. So Florida is one place where it's still a little bit warm. They were complaining about 65-degree weather, and I felt like, I guess it is winter in Florida. We've got Ryan Adams, Tim McAlilly, Chris Simeon, Robert Verrill, and Jason Weber. So thank you, compañeros, for giving us a little shout out. Whether that's on social media or however that is, we do appreciate you engaging in conversation with us. Welcome to all those who are on the stream today. It's nice to have you. And so let's see. Other than coming back from vacation, anything new in your world, Mr. Eugene?
Well, let's see. I finished my course on Kafka streams. No idea if anyone's going to watch it or not. It's funny. These streaming technologies, they vary in how popular they are.
Sure.
But I'm excited to have that done.
I think Kevin will watch it. He will go and he'll watch it. He would just
and he will tell me how I got it wrong. So that's at least one viewer. No, not a ton else going on. I'm taking a little bit of break from like the Pluralsight stuff for a couple weeks, and then we'll see what 2021 looks like.
What happens there?
Oh, I gave a talk to the indie user group on Azure Event Hubs, and I'll be presenting at the Richmond one on that in a couple weeks as well.
Okay, very good. So I'm curious, how have the virtual user groups been going since so this now past transition? They've been pretty good experiences from a speaker perspective, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there was some chatter about all that. I think the biggest issue is that the user groups didn't have access to their own mailing list, right? I think that was the biggest challenge. And Redgate, they picked up the content from past, like the videos and the SQL Saturday website and stuff, but they really didn't get, from what I've heard, they didn't really get much in the way of any user data or even like operational information like contracts and stuff. And so I know I got an email from Redgate saying, hey, please opt in if you'd like to hear more news about the past transition. So they're doing the GDPR thing, right, which I appreciate. But for user groups, it kind of sucks because you're rebuilding those connections potentially. I mean, ideally, email blasted a bunch of people for those few weeks that you had kind of the notice, and they followed you on Meetup. But that was the biggest issue. We had about 13 people, which seems pretty normal to me for a user group.
Yep.
The biggest thing is just having the people and the energy for organizing. I know I was one of the co-organizers for the Pittsburgh Power BI user group, and that's not PASS affiliated, but we've only had one meeting since COVID started, like maybe two, just because everybody's been busy dealing with life.
Sure.
So I think it varies on an organizer level, but they've been going decently well from when I presented.
Very good. Well, it's nice that So for those organizers out there that are still fighting the good fight, we salute you, and hopefully that's still worthwhile to you. I know I know the community appreciates it, even if sometimes they show it in various ways.
Sure.
Yeah. So I admit I have been. Maybe a little bit more. I guess it's odd. A little bit more. I don't know, is protective the right word? I don't know. But I find the after-hour stuff to be more challenging now for me. Right? I'm kind of like I want to get it done. Right? When I get it done, and my work stuff. Now I'm able to. I actually come into the office. I can walk from my house to my office. I can walk. So I have perhaps a little different situation. But I have a hard time trying to take the user group back into my family, life, doing that in the evenings and whatnot. Now work is one thing, right? It's always deployments and whatnot. That's a little different. I chat with customers and stuff. For whatever reason, I am able to compartmentalize that. But the user group stuff I find hard for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think everyone's sick of trying to socialize over Zoom,
Yeah.
It's rough.
Speaking of which, that's a great segue.
Right. SQL Trail.
Your SQL Trail.
We're all excited to socialize over Zoom. Yeah, sorry for that setup. My bad. Well, I'll be there, so that's what matters.
Yeah, there you go. That's all that matters, right? Now it won't be so bad, right? Well, we are. So I can't announce a change yet, but we have been. What's the word? Considering other options. So last time we had SQL Trail, we did it over Zoom, and we tried to use Teams as our chat feature. That was too complicated, right? Use two devices. What the heck do you create? No, don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Now, part of the reason we didn't want to use Zoom was because we were doing we didn't want to use chat in Zoom. Was because we were doing breakout rooms, and those conversations don't flow. Anyway, so one of the changes we're making this time is that we're just doing single track, right? So there's that. So we don't have to worry about the breakout rooms so much, and for the chatting pieces. But there is another piece of technology that we are looking at using. I'm not sure if we're going to use it just yet, but we actually have some demo stuff that is, in theory, supposed to help us, right, a little bit more with that. So we'll see. I mean, in my mind, it's not the same, right? I'm not trying to equate that, the same at all. But I am trying to, I think we are trying to foster or make things a little bit easier, right? So, for example, we have in our networking, we generally we go into breakout rooms, so smaller groups, so maximum of 6 people, just so you have the opportunity to jump into a conversation if you want, right? More than that, it becomes a little bit trickier. So, we'll see. I mean, it is. I agree. It is tough. But I also feel in defense of trying to network over Zoom, I feel like at least from a user group perspective or some of those meeting perspectives, they're trying to make it a little bit too big, too much, and they need to kind of narrow that down into smaller groups. Give people the ability to create those groups, and that's part of what we're trying to do. So anyway, SQL Trail is coming. It is actually going to be, 4 weeks from tomorrow. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 weeks from tomorrow, the 18th of March. So noon to 5. We do have a free option this year, right? So you can come and engage with us online. Or if you'd like to participate and get some swag, we have a new T-shirt this year. We can send you that, and you can get access to our networking piece, which is admittedly a paid community portion. But if you want to upgrade, you can come to that and interact with us. So we hope that you'll consider one of those in whatever format you choose to connect with.
Good deal.
So okay, so our topic today, right? File growths. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, right, to start from the beginning, when we get a new database, and now all of a sudden I feel like I don't remember. I need to go back and take a look. So when you create a new database, by default, if you leave it the way that it is, your initial size is going to be 8 megabytes. And then you're going to get now this is in SQL Server 20, I believe 17. You're going to get auto growth of 64 megabytes. In previous versions, I actually think it was, I feel like it was smaller than that, but I could be off. And so obviously you start putting data in that, right? And it's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. So one of the things that I wanted to chat about today is, right, thinking about file growths and what we need to do with them. And admittedly, so ideally, how about I say this? Ideally, we would be on top of it as administrators, and we would make the file grow before the file needed to grow on its own. Now you keep the auto growth option available so that in the middle of the night, right, some new feature jumps in, or so you have this big import of data or whatever, right? Somebody runs something and all of a sudden you have this new data. It can grow, but ideally we'd like to be ahead of that. So it's growing off hours, weekends, or monitoring it for that kind of things. Now, why is that? So part of the reason is that when the file grows, everything stops until that file growth is over.
Right.
And that's generally, making everything stop is generally not conducive to your users and those who are using the system, right? Which again is why you want to be careful. Okay, so Dan is jumping in. I'm curious to your strategy for non-backed up, almost disposable databases like many pilot environments. Log files tend to grow until I go in and manually shrink them. I was thinking of using PowerShell or DBA tools or SQL agent job to automate that shrinking of LDF files. I can't say. Got you. So, right, the question is, well, I guess he raised a point. So really, we know in SQL Server there are really two pieces to this. There's a data file and then there's a log file.
Right.
Right. Now, generally, I am thinking more about the data file. So the log file can be perhaps a little bit more forgiving, although the same thing still applies. It stops when it needs to grow. Everything stops. It grows, and then it can continue writing.
I think the bigger issue with the log file, again, it's been like 2 or 3 years since I pretended to be a DBA, so feel free to correct me. But I think the bigger issue with the log file is if you don't set the growth on that the way that you want, or you don't right size it initially, then you can end up with a ton of VLFs, virtual log files, because it started out small and it made these little incremental growths. And that's the bigger issue, because when it comes time to do a restore, it might take you forever if you've got just tons and tons of VLFs. That's what I would be worried about, right? Yeah.
So since you brought up VLFs, let's jump into the log, right? So for you young people, right, this may be completely foreign to you, and maybe I have to get a better example. But the example we used to use was a file cabinet, right? So I have when you grow, it's almost like you're putting another file in the file cabinet.
Right.
But then you are, inside of that file, there are sections, right? So this VLF, right, that's what they're called, virtual log files. And so they basically break that down into smaller pieces, and SQL Server can read those. And so it gives them little sections, or they're not rooms per se, but they're areas of writing, and so it breaks that up. And so to Eugene's point, it's like, well, hey, anytime you're then starting to do anything with that log, if you have to look in all those places, you're spending time looking and not actually acting on the data, right? And that can be part of the challenge with VLF. So one of the first things, right, that are with that brings the idea of we need to ensure that both our data files and our log files are right-sized. Okay? So, bringing up the logs, inevitably, they are probably growing because we're not backing them up frequently enough. That's a reason. It could be that there's just a lot of data. We want to keep them small, right? So Dan mentioned a pilot example, right? And so maybe the idea is, well, I don't want to keep as much data in those lower environments, right? Et cetera, which might be a possibility. But inevitably, I think we need to figure out what size it needs to be, right? So TempDB is another example. We don't want to restart TempDB, or we don't want to restart SQL Server just because our TempDBs have gotten so large, right? We may need that size of TempDB for whatever reason, or that's an indicator that we need to go in and tune something and take care of sorting or hashing operations that are existing in the database. But we can't necessarily just. What we don't want to do is get into the habit of, right, this accordion state where I'm shrinking and growing files all the time. And I said I've already gone into the word shrink, right? So when we talk about shrinking, we are really talking about, we generally are going to reserve that for log files. Now, there was a previous episode, once upon a time, so let's see. Now I'm drawing a blank here. We had, let's see, there's John, that's not what I was thinking of. There we go, Nigel. We had Nigel on the program, so this is episode 133.
Okay.
And Nigel talked about, because normally, again, shrinking databases, shrinking data files is generally a no-no, right? And I still feel that way, unless there's a reason. Unless there's a specific reason, and in episode 133, Nigel and I go through a couple of scenarios in which that is the case, and we identify those. So if you're interested in going and taking a peek back at that episode, you can feel free to do so. Now, it can be difficult to know, right, how big things are going to be, particularly if it's new. However, a lot of times I think, we're migrating, and again, right, we don't want to overdo it, and luckily there are some ways for us to fix it, I guess, in the end, but I guess that's for another episode. So what I wanted to do here was I wanted to take a peek and show, let's see, through the magic of, here we go. So that would have been nice. That would have been a nice segue for our slider, Amanda. So when we get that, we have to start playing with that. We haven't gotten that in. So here we have, I needed to close this. I have a, the question is, okay, well, how do we identify when a file or when a data file has grown? And so there are two ways to do this, and of course I just closed that. So if you wanted to, let's see, view, I need to view the Object Explorer, right? So there is here in the reports, and let's see, what is it? I think is it just a performance dashboard report? All of a sudden I'm blanking on the name. No, not that one. There's our non-defaults. Man, I am batting 1,000 here. Okay, I will have to go back and take a peek because all of a sudden this is not. But there is a report that you can take a peek at, a server report in this that can show you, hey, when your file was last grown. Now again, I generally tend to want to do some T-SQL at this. So the scenario is, again, there are a million different reasons why performance can be bad and then all of a sudden be good, right? Like there's, and so this is not to say that this is the reason, but I feel like this is one of those reasons that we can control, right? That we can know about and occasionally lines up, right? A higher percentage chance, how about that? Higher percentage chance that I have seen, hey, I had an issue at 10 o'clock this morning, but now everything seems to be fine. Like, okay. So one of the ways that we can do that is, right, SQL Server has a default trace, meaning it's tracking some pieces or tracking things that are happening. One of the things it's going to track is when my log file grow or when my files grow. And so again, we'll post this up onto the show notes and make this available in the video. But one of the things is you can run this, and then I am going to move the results up this way so you can see them a little bit better. And you'll forgive me that those are a little bit small. Doesn't seem to help any. But it will basically tell you, right, the database and the file that grew. Okay, so in this case, we actually had a data file that grew, and it gives us the time, right? So, sometime this morning. Oh, excuse me, yesterday. Yesterday, 2 p.m. Right, something happened. Some data was inserted, right, caused the file to grow. So we can go back and we can take a peek, and if that is around the time that we get our reported error, right, that could potentially be a way to decide, hey, maybe there was a problem then. Again, there are for different discussions or different scenarios, there are ways to take a peek and future-proof some of this, right? So you want to take a look at what's inside that growth. I mean, SQL Server will tell you. So I guess if I go back into here, right, and I can, so we're not going to shrink it, but I can use the shrink window, and it will tell me, I can get the details of, okay, how much space is actually available in my database. Again, and then we can use that and decide, okay, well, hey, we need to grow this weekend or tonight or whatever the case may be. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of a handy piece of information that I would pass along, and thought that might be interesting for folks.
Nice.
So there you go. So let's see. Now we're going to go back. Very nice. So other thoughts, sentiments, reflections?
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of these things that whether or not it's an actual problem varies a lot by the environment, right?
Sure.
'Cause I remember my last job, our biggest databases were measured in tens of gigabytes, right? And they were accounting systems, and so they didn't have large volumes of data growth, right? A lot of it was archival information, and so this was rarely an issue. I mean, it's amazing. If you've got a terabyte hard drive and your databases are tens of gigabytes, this is probably not going to be an issue for you, right? So I think it's one of those things that's really specific to the environment as to whether or not it's a problem. But it's good to know about, because you would never realize it just from poking around, right? Especially because that internal fragmentation is internal to the file, right? Or the way that it grows is internal to the file, what have you. And so it's good to know about, but it's going to vary for a lot of people whether it's an issue or not.
Sure. Well, I think maybe more specifically, your rate of change of data, right, is going to affect, because depending on how you have, so we talked about, so I guess, well, maybe we didn't talk about it. So let me jump back in there for a second. So when we take a peek at, right, our properties, we want to take a look at the files. So if we've left these, let me close this again. If we have left this, this default auto growth of 64 megs, right, then when it runs out of room, it's going to grow by that amount. So if you are, depending on how quickly you can fill up that 64 megs, right, will depend on your next file growth time. When you get larger, you extend that. So, for example, one of the things we do is we actually extend that to 512, right? We want a little bit more buffer in there. So that can affect it, but that can affect it in a couple of ways. So, one, the larger you make that, the longer it will take the file to actually grow, because you're just making it bigger, right? So again, the stoppage time can vary. Or, right, if you make it smaller and you want that stop time to be smaller, you're just going to have more of them, right? Because it has to, there's less available space for it. So, yeah, I don't disagree. Again, I think rate of change is probably the bigger thing.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And again, right, if your system has been there for a while, right, it may or may not, have an issue, right, and because in theory it can somewhat right size itself. Now we could talk about VLFs, and that's probably something we can save for another time. In the logs, to go back and clean up, but at least then hey, over the course of, a day, or what is my heaviest usage period, right? Which generally, that I see, is generally either going to be, like I'm a data warehouse, I'm doing lots of processing, or I'm doing my index rebuild, right? That's going to generate a lot of log. So whatever my backup times are between there, if I can keep the log or give it enough space for the log to be able to do its thing, take the backup, and then start back at the beginning so it doesn't have to grow, then I'm in good shape. Otherwise, right, again, accordion effect. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So.
Good deal.
Okay. Well, very good, compañeros. I think that's going to do it for today, right? There may be other pieces that I missed. You're welcome to let me know other considerations or other questions that you might have. We can dig into this a little bit later time.
Okay.
So, again, just to recap, to say again, rather, March 18th, SQL Trail. Eugene's going to be there. Our other speakers include Frank. Oh gosh, and all of a sudden I've forgotten Frank's last name. That's not good. I'm having a senior moment. Anyway, Frank from Microsoft. We're going to have Gonzalo Levine. Thank you. Frank Levine is going to be there. Eugene's going to be there. We've got Gonzalo and Mariano are going to give a talk. And Kevin, and our very own Kevin Fiesel. So, looking forward to that. Hope to check out SQLtrail.com if you're interested in coming. We'd appreciate it. And compañeros, as always, you can reach out to us if you have questions or comments, or if you want to learn about Kafka. You can reach out to Eugene.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at SQLgene. I blog at SQLgene.com, and you can find my amazing courses on various streaming technologies on pluralsight.com.
And you can reach out to me, compañeros. I am on LinkedIn. I'm at Carlos L. Chacon. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope to see you on the SQL Trail, March 18th. Talk to you later.
Bye.
SQL Data Partners.